What? What do you mean you don't want to be a dishwasher? Look, the question in the title of the video is more of a rhetorical question, okay? I'm not, expecting you to be jumping at the opportunity here, but I really need you to go along with...
What the fuck?
There must have been a fateful moment back in our hunter-gatherer days in which one of our great-great-great-great-grandfathers was eating some mammoth meat, or dodo stew, or Stellar's sea cow salad or something and thought to themselves, you know what? These appendages God has given us just aren't good enough. Such a revolutionary thought it must have been for beings at a time when your hands were basically your spoons, forks, and plates all in one. So ungrateful. You can't just go with what the old man in the sky gave you? We as a species always gotta make things a little bit more complicated, don't we? That's the story of many of our greatest inventions, including dishes. Dishes have a bit of a convoluted history, but that's mostly because it's kinda hard to define what a dish is in the first place. The earliest plates were probably big shells, leaves, the peels of certain fruits, or whatever was lying around. Are those plates? Or are they bowls? Is a stick a fork? Is a sword a knife? Is a rock a table? Is a Pop-Tart ravioli? We'll just say these plates don't count for now until we get to trenchers. Trenchers were the stiff, stale pieces of bread that had been left out long enough to carry food on top of them. Then when you finished your meal, you could eat the plate if you wanted. That's right, back in the good old days, you could eat your plates after you finished your meal. Now that's a tradition I say we should consider looking back into. Think of it, you could have cinnamon toast plates, French toast plates, or even whole wheat plates for the people who like to pretend that they're eating healthy. Trenchers worked as a plate until forks came along at the end of the Middle Ages. Because forks were apparently puncturing too many holes in the trenchers. Are you regretting straying from God's original design yet?
You know what? This is ridiculous. I'm just going to use my hands.
Forks were actually the last kind of silverware we got though. Knives kinda came first, assuming that you count the knives that are more designed for ending lives. If you don't think that those knives count though, spoons are technically the earliest utensil that we know of for the purpose of eating. The earliest spoons have been dated back to the Paleolithic period.
Before the woolly rhinos went extinct.
Now, the whole idea of having reusable dishes sounds incredible, until you remember that they need to be cleaned in order to be reused, which for some time may or may not have just meant rinsing it off with water, but then Antony von Leeuwenhoek came along and invented bacteria. So water just isn't gonna be enough. We're gonna need some chemistry. We don't really know who invented soap, but our best guess goes to ancient Mesopotamians. Around the year 2500 BC, we have our first clay instruction manual on how to make soap. This soap was created by mixing oil and wood ash and then doing a backflip. But soap isn't the same thing as detergent. Soap is more about plant and animal oils. Detergent is more about mixing synthetic man-made sciencey sounding words together. In terms of actually washing dishes, let's just skip to 1850 because I don't want to think about washing dishes before that point, to be honest. Thank you, Joel Houghton, for inventing the dishwasher. I have a shrine dedicated to you next to the sauté pans. But no, seriously, dish machines truly are magic, aren't they? Dirty dish in, clean dish out, and yeah, I get that it just ends up getting dirty again, but that's the beauty of it if you think about it. The circle of life it is. The circle of life that you have the privilege, as a dishwasher, of overseeing. From seeing the sorry state of used, filth-ridden, unholy dishes, to seeing the revival of the very vessels used to dine and nourish, to baptize in the name of phosphates, bleaching agents, and sodium hydroxide, to complete the circle and witness the rebirth of overlooked utensils no one will appreciate until they aren't around, to see them born again, reincarnated, pure as snow for the next hungry soul, to mediate and balance the dichotomy of cleanliness and
Austin?
Yeah, Gabe?
I think the booster here is broken.
I wanna die.
So, Now that you've been thoroughly convinced this is how you want to spend 50 hours of your week, we're going to need to go over some basics. I'm working in a kitchen, and my kitchen may be very different from yours. You may not even be working in a kitchen, but a lot of my advice should carry over, at least to a certain degree. Let's start with the clothes you'll need. Which shirts are you willing to get wet? How do you feel about white shirts turning yellow? Black pants are dress code at my restaurant, preferably the ones with the least amount of bleach stains. Then we need to craft ourselves some boots. I invested in these boots because sitting in wet socks for long periods of time can give you trench foot or other infections if you aren't careful. My feet definitely stay dry in these. You don't need boots though, just be careful about sitting in wet socks for long periods of time. And get something that's water resistant, oil resistant, and slip resistant. That last one being especially important, by the way, because the floors of your new home are going to be wet. And if you don't have the proper equipment, you could slip and fall and die. I don't know if most restaurants require you to get your own chef jacket, but we don't need to do that. I'll grab an apron as well because I don't feel like getting my pants too soaked. And now you're dressed well enough to greet all your lovely dishes. And you may as well give them a good hello because before you know it, you're gonna be sharing all your deepest, darkest secrets with them. We have medium rounds, large rounds, pasta bowls, salad plates, ovals, bread and butter plates, ramekins, soup cups, monkey dishes, gorilla dishes, gigantopithecus dishes, sizzle plates, long plates, and a whole bunch of other stuff. You're also a wizard now that you've signed up for this job, so you better get to know your magic spells as well. We have Pot Scout, Multi-Quat Sanitizer, Bleach, Solid Power, Solid Brilliance, Apex Pre-Soak, Wash and Walk, and Degreaser.
Degreaser? I hardly know her.
Yes, thank you, Ryan. Anyway, our restaurant makes a good chunk of its food homemade, which means we're gonna have plenty of tins, pans, and other doohickeys to go around for the whole party. And there's no way all this is going to get done with a single person. Oh no. Some restaurants only have a single dishwasher running their dishes, but our kitchen needs at least 2 to get through on a good time. So I think it's about time you met the Hobart Squad. I do believe you've already met Gabe, the ex-high school chemistry teacher who also happens to be a persecuted vegan working in an incredibly not vegan restaurant.
And I'm gonna have to watch this later.
Then we have ourselves Rohullah. Originally from Afghanistan, Rohullah doesn't speak much English. He actually speaks a language called Dari. If there's one lesson that you should learn from Rohullah, it's that you should never let the language barrier prevent you from being an absolute goober.
Make this video exponentially better.
Oh, yeah, and, then you have, of course, yours truly. The homeschooler, video game apologist, and pretentious artist. I smoke water vapor and snort sodium hydroxide. And finally, last but certainly not least, we have Hobie Bosco, the linchpin of our team. Hobie is our trusty water and steel type Pokemon that has been washing our dishes, and he's been going at it non-stop since before I was born. We went with the name Hobie Bosco because Gabe wanted to name him after Hobie, a character in the book The Goldfinch, but I wanted to name him Bosco because I've been playing way too much Deep Rock Galactic lately, and so we went with both. And he's a really good boy, alright? Hobarting at our restaurant is a 2-person job through and through. One person pitches and the other person catches. Pitching involves building racks of dishes that are organized in such a manner as to get as clean as possible when they go through Hobie. Catching primarily involves picking up all the clean dishes Hobie regurgitates and putting them where they belong, stocking plates for the line, and wrangling some silverware. In the midst of all this, we also have to take care of the oily pots and pans Hobie doesn't like in the classic 3-compartment sink. We also have to change the trash, clean the bathrooms, there's a bunch of other stuff that needs to be done as well. It's a lot of work for one person to do by themselves. Trust me when I say it is no fun solo barding at my restaurant. This workload calls for a minimum of 2 people. But it's not just the workload that calls for 2 people, it's the health inspector that calls for 2 people. I mean, it probably wouldn't be too wise to have one person touch all these dirty dishes and then touch the clean dishes with his dirty hands, you know? I understand that there are restaurants out there where there's only one dishwasher doing all the dishwashing, but I don't want to have to wash my hands once every 5 racks of dishes to catch for myself. That's just not good enough for my standard of what makes a dish clean. But what does it mean to have a clean dish? Well, I am so glad you asked. This is the food code for my state. It's the criteria the health inspector uses when they come by like a thief in the night to make sure we're not food poisoning anyone. The health code is kind of like the terms and conditions of restaurants. We all accept them, but none of us have actually ever read them before, including me, so I'm just gonna give you my criteria for what makes a clean dish. It's a lot less boring. There are 2 primary components to getting a dish clean. The first is the obvious stuff. Getting rid of the food on the dish is part of the game for sure, but it's not nearly as important as sanitization. You can get a dish to look pretty clean with just some water, but that's only a fraction of the work. Gross and old food is gross and old, but it won't get you nearly as sick as the children of Leeuwenhoek. There's a few methods of sanitization known to Hobarts around the world. We have good old bleach, which apparently makes bacteria explode, so you know, that's always fun. We also have Ecolab's finest multi-quat disinfectant for soaking all of your sins away, and when I say soaking, I mean soaking, by the way, for a little bit, like it should sit in there for a while. I don't want to see any dipping. You're psychotic if you're a dipper. We don't do dipping here. And finally, we have my favorite method of killing bacteria, heat. It's Hobie's favorite method too. That's why Hobie has a little booster heater.
Booster heater? I hardly know her.
Anyway, turns out germs are biological organisms that can only survive under certain conditions, and 180-degree saunas are not one of them, so, you know, heat works wonders. There are definitely dish machines out there that prefer to use chlorine or other chemicals to do the sanitization, probably because burning your hands on clean dishes isn't to everyone's taste, but Hobie Bosco just prefers spamming scald, just like me. Regardless, sanitization is kinda important. I could just spray the food off the plates, but that's really only 30% of the work. A plate could look totally clean and still not be, and sometimes I get the sense that people's criteria for what is truly clean leans a bit too much on what they can visually see. It feels like germ theory is nothing more than a psychological game to most people. But we Hobarts are not most people. We take out the visible and the invisible. This is a fairly black and white profession if you ask me. There's no such thing as a 95% clean dish. There's only two kinds of dishes out there, clean and Once you got that part down, it's all down to the details. Dishwashing is easy to learn, hard to master. Once you have the mindset right, and a basic understanding of how your position works, it's all about those thousands of tiny idiosyncratic optimizations that when put together make or break your efficiency. I can't tell you what those details are to you because they change from restaurant to restaurant. Each restaurant has their own dishes, their own ideal way to wash each individual dish, their own confusing layouts as to where every single dish belongs. Every restaurant has their own collection of chemicals that need to be replenished at different times. Each restaurant has their own menu dictating which dishes get used more than others. Each restaurant has their own managers with their own priorities. Each restaurant has their own culture and even their own subcultures. Oh, would you look at the time? It's almost time to open? Well, you know, if you want to get good at work like this, it's a pretty hands-on kind of job, you know. You could educate yourself, don't get me wrong. You could get a degree of Hobartology from the University of Ecolab, but you still wouldn't truly be prepared without doing it yourself. So, since you clearly have nothing better to do with your time, why don't I take you through a full day in the trenches with the crew, eh? And you know what? Let's add some more classical music in the background because I'm feeling extra pretentious today. So, depending on how homemade the food at your restaurant is, you're gonna have some prep work dishes waiting for you when you're done with the opening chores. This isn't that big a deal. You'll get done with that before opening time. When opening does come around, the line cooks are gonna get real busy real fast, but you won't. The cooks are gonna get the initial earthquake, but about 30 minutes after every earthquake, there's a tsunami that follows. Assuming it takes your guests 30 minutes or so to eat their food, you get to deal with the tsunami. And when that wave comes, it's all about priorities. Having the game sense to know what your total inventory of dishes looks like, how often each dish is used up, and when they're going to need to be replenished on the line. Remember that you are the engine of the restaurant. You need to be efficient, but there is a line somewhere between efficiency and lazy expediency that you need to draw in order to maintain integrity. Once that line has been established, figure out your priorities. Dirty plates will probably start rolling in about 30 minutes after opening, and by the time you get those plates cleaned, the line is probably going to need more. About an hour to an hour and a half in, your servers are going to need some more silverware. The saute pans can soak for a bit, the line isn't going to need those for a while, but don't forget about them. They will bite you later on in the night if you do. Silverware has to get washed 2 times as per industry standard. They get washed once in a flat rack, then they get organized and washed a second time standing upright. Only when the silverware's been washed twice can the servers take the silverware. If you see a server swiping silverware before the secondary sanitation ceremony, sincerely scold them for stealing single scrub spoons and such. When you go to replenish plates on the line, you're going to get in people's way. There's not a ton of space and you're going to need to move quickly. Communicate. Say behind if you're behind someone. Say corner if you're going around a corner.
Corner? I hardly know her.
Just generally trying to be a good person is a really good strategy. Because if it's your job to get in people's way, you want them to like you. Trust me, being a likable person getting in people's way is much different from being a jerk who gets in people's way. Bumping into someone and dropping a bunch of plates isn't just going to take time, it's gonna hurt your mood pretty bad, which is going to affect your performance. I swear those plates are engineered to be as unnecessarily loud as possible when they hit the floor. You will drop a stack of plates at some point, especially if you do this long enough. It's gonna suck. Keep going. Remember to soak the dishes that have the old crustiness on them. You're really just wasting your time if you try and clean those right away. If you're pitching, spray off 70 to 90% of the food before you send it through Hobie. This prevents Hobie's water from getting too dirty too fast. You'll have to change the water once every 2 hours or so, as it is. It's all gonna ramp up, but be prepared because when it's time to close, a huge wave of dishes is approaching. This is your final wave. This is your true rush of work. At closing time, you're not just gonna continue to residually receive plates and such, but you're also gonna receive dishes from everyone shutting down their station. The line, backline, and the bar are all going to break down at the same time. You will get behind. There is no staying on top of this wave. It's just a matter of staying focused and enduring. This is where you can learn most clearly that this is a psychological game. The dishes will come to you in relatively random order, which means you're not going to be very organized. Taking the time to organize the dishes can make the load feel a bit smaller. That feeling may be the difference between you being motivated enough to get through the next 2 hours versus sitting there soaking in your misery. If any of the servers or chefs tell you, hey, this is the last dirty dish, they're lying. There's always at least one more dish lying around somewhere that needs to be cleaned. If your restaurant is anything like mine, you're gonna be the last man in the kitchen. You may even be out later than the rest. That final wave of dishes is going to break whatever's left of your soul, but even after that, it's going to be time to finish off with some closing chores. And everything needs to be spotless. The counter, Hobie's intestines, the floor, and beyond. You can't leave a single crumb behind. Not just because whoever's opening in a few hours will tell you off if you do, but also to avoid attracting any such critters that would like to have some crumbs drop by. You'll have to be thorough, but once you've finished, all that's gonna be left is to take the last of the trash out. And we do have a bit of a hike at my restaurant when we're doing the trash, so that's how we tend to end off our shift. With a nice midnight hike to the good old dumpster.
Dumpster? I hardly...
Just the way God intended it.
Thank you, Joey. Anyway, you know how weird it is to enjoy a job that is not supposed to be enjoyable? What is there even to like about a job like this? Well, it's consistent, for one. It has its ups and downs in terms of busyness and whatnot, but there's an overall structure to it that is rather comfortable. You get to hang out in your own bubble for the most part, which is great. Unlike the rest of the kitchen, I have just the right amount of human interaction. I'm left alone for the most part when I'm busy, but I can still say hi and make jabs at the server when they pop by. Not to mention there's ample opportunity to go the extra mile and help out people who need a quick thing done for them here and there. I love feeling helpful, and this job really does a good job of providing me those little opportunities. You tend to have plenty going on with a job like this, and that really helps the time fly by. But at the same time, it's busy work you can accomplish on autopilot. I'm not usually bored doing this job, but I also don't have to be hyper-focused either. And this is a wonderful thing, because this is where I can come up with my ideas. Just as a few examples, my Metroid Dread video I mostly came up with while I was in the dish pit, as well as this one weird Overwatch video I made. My Zoo Tycoon 2 video started as an idea I came up with here, as well as my magnum opus, 3 Marching Bombs, which started as an idea that I had in the dish pit. I came up with all the lyrics to my song Amputee Amplified while working here, and there are plenty of other examples of yet to be realized ideas that originated right here. This job is like part of my creative process, and as a creative, it's so nice to have a place to step away from the computer and away from all the parts of my life that drip feed me dopamine, and just let my mind conjure up ideas to put back into action when I get home. It's fantastic, really. I like my work. I like the people that I work with for the most part. The servers seem to like me for some reason. I've gotten to meet and work with people directly from all over the world: Afghanistan, Ukraine, Ethiopia, El Salvador, and many others. I get free food, I get to feel productive, I get to feel helpful, and the job contributes in a meaningful way to my creative process. What's there not to like about a job like this? Well, I'm sure that for most people, restaurant work isn't exactly a dream job for a reason. Anyone who works in a kitchen can tell you that 10-hour workdays aren't uncommon, and on top of a long commute to work, that can be pretty taxing for a lot of people. But 15-hour shifts are certainly something that can happen. Sometimes it feels like your entire life is just you working and spending all of your free time recovering from working. Being friends with someone who works in a kitchen is kind of miserable because we're always busiest on the weekend, and then we're the least busy at the beginning of the work week when everyone else is busy. Not a lot of room for socializing outside of fellow restaurant people when Friday and Saturday nights are always booked. And it isn't particularly good for your health either. Being on your feet for a minimum of 10 hours a day isn't healthy for you on the long run by any stretch. My record is 17 hours in one day from open to close on a holiday. And I'm not alone. This is kinda how restaurant workloads work, man. You will have battle scars, plenty of cuts and burns, but chef's foot is apparently a thing for a reason. And while I don't feel I'm in much of a position to comment too thoroughly on the mental health aspect of this job, there is absolutely something that needs to be said there. It's hard to see an environment like this take a toll on the mental health of the people around you, and watch that snowball into a worse and worse experience for everyone. It's a problem you have to be proactive in combating, or you'll just get wrapped up in the negativity yourself. Being in the dish pit helps because you have some degree of independence, but it's all connected. Turnover kinda hurts too, you know? Sometimes I wonder if people see the dishwasher needed job applications online and think to themselves, that must be a really easy job that you can just do mindlessly and get done with minimal effort, only to learn that the job requires a lot more effort than they initially anticipated. People often leave after one day of working there. They no call, no show the next day. And it's not uncommon either. It's frustrating to invest all the training in them only for them to no call, no show the next day. And I'm at the point where I just kind of expect that thing to happen. Sometimes it happens to the point where you wonder if you're part of the problem. And if I'm honest with myself, I could be part of the problem to a certain degree. I feel like I've done enough introspection to come to the conclusion that I'm the kind of person who has a very high tolerance for BS. I can be a bit of a doormat. I can roll with a lot of punches that come my way, and I kind of feel like I have to be that way in order to work at a job like this for so long. But over time, I've noticed the systems we've adopted slowly become more and more strenuous. Systems that the higher-ups who put these systems in place wouldn't ever care about because they wouldn't touch Hobie Bosco with a 10-foot pole. And I'm willing to bet that when someone gets hired to work with me and they see how much these systems have fallen, they wisely nope out early because they respect themselves enough to not be a doormat. Perhaps I kind of enable these poor management decisions by having such a high tolerance of whatever they throw my way. But management always plays a role in how tolerable your job is. Like most people who work in restaurants, or many jobs really, managers are just trying to get home. They're motivated to encourage their employees to work hard because they want to get home, which means that if they're closing at a restaurant, they're more likely to reward speed and punish the slower workers. And this kind of makes sense on the surface, but in my overwhelming experience, the faster dishwashers are actually the laziest dishwashers, because the faster dishwashers are the ones looking to cut corners and ignore safety and health code regulations to shave off a minute or two. The slower dishwashers usually aren't lazy, they're usually detail-oriented. They're taking more time to work because they're actually doing their job correctly. But to a closing manager who doesn't feel the need to step in and help, slow dishwashers are the lazy ones, and fast dishwashers are the good ones. This leads to so many situations where it feels like if you genuinely care about the job, you get punished for trying to do the right thing. And there are very few feelings more soul-crushing than feeling like you're being punished for trying to do the right thing. And that weight isn't the only thing you feel, there's also this whole societal weight to the whole thing. I hate talking about this because I can't talk about it without sounding so whiny, but what do you do when you enjoy a job that is entry level? A job that's supposed to be the first step to something else, not the destination. You often feel this sort of implicit judgment in the tone of other people who learn that you've been doing this for so so long. Like, you should have moved on. You should have learned to cook or something else in the restaurant by now. And maybe you should have, because maybe this is you being complacent, but at the same time, you found something that you enjoy doing. Why can't you just let yourself enjoy doing it? You will have days when you feel as though you can't do it anymore. You will have days where your feet are covered in blisters and you know that they won't heal before tomorrow when you have more work. You will have days when you burn your hand at just the right spot, and now every time you come in contact with heat from the machine, your body reminds you of that injury. You will have days where the dish machine decides to break down on you and you need to wash all these dishes by hand. You will have days where your partner for the day calls out and you have to do a two-person job by yourself for the wages of one person. But potentially worst of all, you will have days where you are extra vulnerable to the existential crisis. And as you're alone in that dish pit with the dishes piling up, covering you from the outside, as you'll work there alone with all those thoughts that eat you alive, you will have to find a way to keep pushing in spite of those invasive thoughts. Those thoughts that make you question yourself and what you're doing with your life. Those thoughts that snowball into anxiety and depressive episodes. Those thoughts that make you wonder how you got there. Those thoughts that make you feel like the future is too uncertain. Those thoughts that amplify the overthinking issues you already have. Thoughts that remind you how much you're missing out on. Those thoughts that guilt you into doing enough. Those thoughts that make you question where the time has been. Those thoughts that make you wonder what others think of your squadron. Those thoughts that make you question. Those thoughts that remind you how much you're missing out on. Those thoughts that make you question where the time has wonder what others think of your squadron.
Those thoughts that could never be drowned out by the roar of a dish machine or the clinking of plates. Nothing but the gossip of passing by servers can penetrate the temporary walls that always fall at their command. Would you hook a booster heater up to your eyes if it could heat up your tears so that they sting a little bit harder, but evaporate a little bit faster? You're running out of detergent again. You're always running out of detergent, and that is the price you pay. The wages of these sins are the prices of the sodium hydroxide bricks and the walk to the chemical closet. A chemical closet with no room for a skeleton, but sheets of paper that mark every 6th hour you sold to a corporation for money. There's no detergent for that. And as long as that's the case, those thoughts will never wash away. Not now, not a year ago, and especially not on the other side of October.
October.
Don't say it.
What?
Just don't say it.
What are you talking about?
Don't. I saw that look in your eye. I know you want to say it. Just
No.
don't.
Actually, I wasn't planning on saying anything.
I just want you to know that I can always buy more food to throw at you, and it will always be worth it.
That's just great to know.
I'm not letting you ruin the mood.
Honestly, Joey, I feel like you're doing a great job of ruining the mood without me.
I'm still hungry, and you're ruining the mood.
Then why did you think it was a good idea to go to a Paleolithic restaurant?
I didn't know we had to hunt for our own food here.
Well, thanks to you, we've both contracted yellow fever, and we're still hungry.
I thought there would at least be some extinct animals to sightsee.
Okay, maybe we should just go with my suggestions from now on, Joey.
Wait, all right, whatever. Waiter, check please. I think that's an imposter.
Imposter? I hardly know her!
Hey, so I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but you've been listening to a guy talk about washing dishes for the past 30 minutes or so, and I don't really know what you're doing with your life or what you're procrastinating on right now or how you managed to find yourself here, but I'm thankful you watched this thus far, and I'd like to share some last thoughts that might resonate with you no matter what job you may be working at the moment. This is a picture I have of a former coworker and I in early 2022. His name is James, and this photo was taken on his 80th birthday. He retired about a week later. James worked in the dish pit with me for about 2 years or so. Before he worked with me though, he worked at another dish pit down in Florida for about 39 years. All in all, he worked just about 42 years as a dishwasher. And if you've never worked in a dish pit, I don't know if I could ever fully communicate to you how insane that really is. and there's a lot that you can learn from someone who's been dishwashing for that long. But when you run into someone like James, you can't help but wonder what his life was like spending his entire life as a dishwasher. He never complained about his job, he never seemed bothered by the fact that he spent over half his life in a dish pit. He seemed perfectly fine with it. Usually when you work with old people in the kitchen, they at least complain about their back or knee or something, but not James. He just kept trucking. I think about that lifestyle a lot and what it means to live your entire life content at the bottom, so to speak. And I think about what my life would be like if I took that route myself. I have another friend named Waqas. Waqas and I worked together for a few months. He was a server though, not a dishwasher. We've maintained our friendship after working together, and he's a big advocate for me getting out of the dish pit. I think he sees potential in me or whatever and thinks that I can go beyond the dish pit. He has this piece of advice he hits me with every time I see him that goes, take one risk every day. Even if it's a small risk. You just gotta take a risk every day, man. And look, I get the feeling that he got that advice from a tech bro, entrepreneur, TED Talk speaker who also probably encourages his followers to invest in Bitcoin, which makes me want to discard the advice altogether, but I get it. There's absolutely truth to the idea that I should be taking steps out of my comfort zone to grow a little. But then I always think about James, man. He's washing dishes in his late 70s and doesn't mind it. Is that because he didn't take any risks, or what? There's like a balance somewhere in between complacency and contentment, and I just don't feel like I know where to draw that line yet. Was James complacent, or was he content? Is Waqas's advice built for fighting complacency, or building a foundational mindset that will never allow you to feel content? I don't feel like I have any answers there, and I feel like I would be having this discussion with myself no matter what job I was doing. I've heard the arguments from both sides, you know? I've heard people say, hey, if you're happy, that's what really matters. And I get that to an extent, but how do I know that isn't just an excuse for complacency? And on the other side, you constantly hear talks about how you should always be trying new things, and if you aren't, you're probably not growing. But then you hear these stories of people who spend like 60 years of their lives weaving baskets or fiddling with pottery or something. How do those people fit into your worldview? I don't feel like I have an answer to this conundrum at the moment, so I'll end with this. I am not the kind of person who likes to proclaim that they deserve to get paid more money because, I mean, of course I would think that, right? I'm only a little bit biased towards myself there. But in my experience, I feel pretty confident in asserting that a lot of people who work these lower end jobs deserve a lot more credit than they get. Have you ever had a conversation with a parent or someone about your future, and one of them tells you about how if you don't follow this certain path in life, you'll be stuck flipping burgers? Like, that's the title that blue-collar workers get stuck with, I guess. Flipping burgers, eh? And what do? Type keyboards? These people wouldn't survive an hour working in front of a grill, and you're going to look down on blue-collar folks with such condescension? I've lived most of my life surrounded by middle to upper-class people, and I've worked with lower-class people as long as I've had work. And I'd be willing to bet money on these lower-class citizens outworking people with, quote, real jobs. So, I guess this is to them, then. To the college dropout who couldn't be bothered to get a job beyond a dishwashing position. To the line cooks who work 70 hours a week. To the immigrant father providing for his family of 6 on $10 an hour. To the single mother who has to work 2 jobs to stay afloat, but can barely hold a job because her daughter has seizures that she has to attend to. To the 50-year-old man who had a brain aneurysm and had to take a janitor position when his family abandoned him. To all the invisible people who hold up the industries everyone else takes for granted. I hope you feel seen. I hope you feel heard. I hope you find ways to be content, but not too content. I hope you'll be vocal when you know you need to be. Don't let yourself become a doormat, and make sure you're confident in what your worth is. Until next time, this has been your friendly neighborhood Hobart, signing off. Bye.